Sir, I do this on camera for 40,000 people. That's a flea market copy. The line crossed the folding table at a measured volume, pitched for the camera and not the man. Trent Reinhardt stood behind the ring light. The small white circle reflected cleanly in each of his eyes. 34 years old, newly certified that spring by a National Appraisers Association, he worked with the confidence of someone who had learned the system and trusted it completely. His phone sat on a tripod angled just right, capturing every motion. 42,000 followers watched his Spot the Fake account, tuned in for moments exactly like this. On the felt in front of him sat his tools: loop, digital scale, neatly squared, precise. He moved fast, efficient. Take the piece, name it, evaluate, price, return. The rhythm rarely broke. The line in front of him moved with that rhythm. 3 feet back stood Hollis Galloway, 64 years old, lean, shoulders still squared, his weight set evenly on both boots the way a man stands when he learned young to hold a position and not give it up. He said nothing at first. He watched. When his turn came, he stepped forward without hurry and placed a small blue case on the felt between them. The room did the thing rooms do, just slightly, leaned in. Reinhardt's eyes brightened, the way they did when he thought he already understood what he was looking at. "Oh, now," he said, adjusting the phone just enough to frame it better. He opened the case and lifted the metal by its ribbon, holding it up into the flat white light. The Navy Cross caught it cleanly. He turned it face up toward the lens, but not over. "Folks, look at this," he said, voice shifting into performance. "We get a lot of these." He pointed, not reading, just indicating. "See the hand engraving on the back? That's your tell. Genuine articles are machine-stamped. When you see hand-cut lettering like this, you're looking at a reproduction. Tribute piece. Somebody's keepsake." He set it down on the scale. The number flashed. Correct, exact. But he did not pause on it. "Sir, I do this on camera for 40,000 people. That's a flea market copy. I can give you $25 as a novelty piece." Hollis didn't answer immediately. He reached past the loop, past the scale, and picked up the metal himself. He turned it face down in his palm first. His thumb found the reverse before his eyes did, tracing the stamped line as if confirming something already known. He weighed it once in his hand, the way you weigh something you have weighed 1,000 times before. Then he spoke. "You didn't check the back." Reinhardt almost smiled, still half in performance. "I don't need to." Hollis read it anyway. Quiet, steady, like a man reading a gauge. Department of the Navy. He didn't raise his voice, didn't look at the camera, just the metal. He named the year, the weight, the feel of it sitting in the hand exactly as it should, not an ounce wrong. Reinhardt's expression held, but something in it began to shift, just slightly, as the words landed. "You said the back was the tell," Hollis continued. "You're right that it's the tell." A pause. "You've just got it backwards." Behind them, the line stilled. A woman holding a folder stopped moving entirely. Someone further back leaned in half a step without realizing it. And in that small, quiet space between what had been said and what had not yet been understood, something began to change. Here is key point 2 expanded to 600 words, carefully staying true to the original tone, pacing, and wording, only deepened, not rewritten. 3 hours before the ballroom, the rail spur behind Hollis Galloway's house was still blue with cold. He walked it most mornings, out to the switch and back. Boots black the night before, set by the door like he still had a duty roster to answer to. The ground held the night's frost, and the air carried that thin, clean bite that comes before the sun has decided to take hold of the day. He moved at a steady pace, not fast, not slow. The kind of pace that comes from habit rather than intention. "Winds out of the north," he said aloud. "Frost burns off by 9. There was no one there to hear it. The habit had outlasted the audience for it. Anyone who once listened was gone, or grown, or not coming back. Still, he said it, same as always. The house behind him sat small and spare against the morning. He had kept it that way on purpose. A man who had once lived out of a footlocker did not need much. And what he did keep, he kept in order. His hands told most of the story. The knuckles carried old scars, white seams worn smooth with time. On his right ring finger sat a stainless band, his father's, not hers. When he was thinking, he turned it a quarter turn and back. A small motion, repeated. He was doing it now. The marriage had lasted 11 years after he came home. Then it hadn't. He understood that better now than he had then. What he had brought back with him was not something a person could stand beside forever without it costing them something. He had given her ring back. The one he wore stayed. He had been a Marine from 1979 to 1987. Beirut, October 1983. That was as much as he ever said of it, which was enough. The citation in the blue case on his kitchen table held the rest, written in language he had never read all the way through. He didn't need to. He knew what it said in the only ways that mattered. He knew what the metal weighed, not from any catalog, but from the day it had been placed into his hands, and the nights since, held in the dark, turned over, again and again. Back inside, the kitchen held the quiet of a place used carefully. He poured coffee into a plain mug and added a half-pinch of salt off the back of his thumb, a mess deck habit from a galley that had been scrap metal for decades. The motion was exact, measured, unchanged. He drank it standing at the counter. The blue case sat in front of him, hinge side toward him. He had repaired that hinge himself 2 winters back with a jeweler's pin. You could see the fix if you knew where to look. The county had sent 3 letters. The first had been a notice. The second, a warning. The third used the word lien, 4 years behind on property taxes. At the bottom of the letter sat a number. He had done the arithmetic at this same counter more times than he could count. Every time it came out the same. Sell the one thing. Keep the 4 walls. He set the empty cup in the sink and stood there a moment longer, looking at the case. It was the only thing in the house that would cover it. Not furniture, not the tools, not anything else he owned. Just that. He picked it up. There was no ceremony in the motion, no hesitation left. That part had already been done, quietly, over the past weeks. Each time he ran the numbers again, hoping they might change. They hadn't. Outside, the morning had begun to shift. The blue in the rail spur was thinning, the frost giving way in small patches where the light touched first. He paused at the door, boots set, coat already on. Then he stepped out, closing it behind him. The house stayed quiet. The case stayed in his hand, and the decision, already made, walked with him toward the day. Back in the ballroom, the rhythm resumed, as if nothing had shifted. Reinhardt straightened slightly behind the table, settling back into the posture that had carried him through hundreds of these exchanges. The ring light cast its flat, even glow across the felt, turning everything beneath it into something that looked less like an object and more like evidence. "This is actually a great teaching moment," he said, angling the phone just enough to keep both his hands and the metal in frame. His voice carried easily now, practiced, confident. "We get a lot of these. Family pieces people genuinely believe are real." He lifted the loop again, bending over the metal. But his attention stayed where it had been from the start, on the engraving. "Look at this. Nicely done, sure. Somebody cared. But the market doesn't pay for sentiment. It pays for authenticity, and authenticity has tells." He traced the back lightly with the tip of the tool, never quite touching the metal itself. "And this right here, this is the tell." He didn't turn it, didn't shift it into the light, didn't weigh it again. Hollis watched. He didn't interrupt at first, didn't correct, just stood with his weight evenly set, hands quiet except for the small, habitual turn of the ring, quarter turn, and back. The people in line had begun to slow their own movements. A man holding a wrapped clock drifted half a step closer. The woman with the folder remained still, her attention fixed on the open case. Something in the air had changed, though nothing had been said yet to name it. "You measured the engraving," Hollis said at last. It wasn't a question. Reinhardt didn't look up immediately. "I assessed the piece." "You didn't weigh it." The scale sat inches away, its earlier reading already gone dark. It had told the truth. It had simply not been listened to. Reinhardt straightened now, a small edge entering his expression. "I've already—" "And you didn't turn it to the light," Hollis continued, calm, steady, not raising his voice. "Didn't check the strike. Didn't ask the only question that matters." That brought a pause. Reinhardt's eyes shifted, just briefly. "Which is?" he asked, though the answer was already in the space between them. "Whether the name on the back is mine." The words landed differently than the ones before them. Not louder, not sharper, just heavier. A younger man near the back lifted his phone, beginning to record from a second angle. Reinhardt's posture tightened, the performance slipping just enough to show the effort behind it. "Sir," he said, the word carrying a careful patience now, "I'm not going to argue. Authentication with, respectfully, a gentleman who clearly has an attachment to the piece." He gestured lightly toward the metal, toward the case, toward the idea of it. I appraise hundreds of these. I've built an audience on telling people the truth they don't want to hear. A small pause. $25. That's my number. It came out colder this time, more final, and more public. The room held still around it. Hollis looked down at the case for a moment. Not long, just long enough. Then he reached out and closed the lid with 2 fingers, gently, the way you close a door on a quiet room. He picked it up, turned half a step toward the double doors, toward the parking lot, toward the road that would take him back to the small house with the lien waiting on it. He could have left. There was nothing in the number that could hurt him anymore. That part had already been decided at the kitchen counter, long before the ballroom, long before the light, long before the audience. The metal had come here to become money, and now it had become something else. A moment, a scene, something for people to watch. That would not pay the county. He took another step, then stopped. He turned back, just slightly, and set the closed case down again on the corner of the table, not opening it, not offering it, just placing it where it could be reached. It's not for argument, he said. His voice stayed even. You can call it what you want. A small pause, but you've got a line of people behind me who are going to hand you the things their dead carried. The words settled into the room, quiet and firm, and they deserve a man who turns things over before he names them. He let that sit for a moment. Then, almost as an afterthought, but not quite, turn things over, son. The back is where the truth is kept. It was the most he had said all morning. Not to win, not to prove, just the one correction he would give for free. After that, he was done. From the wall, Sandra Pruitt stepped forward. She had not moved much until now. 58, a civilian records archivist, she carried herself with the quiet steadiness of someone who spent her days inside other people's histories. The folder she had been holding earlier was now tucked under her arm, forgotten. Her attention was fixed entirely on the closed blue case resting at the edge of the table. May I see the back of that? Her voice was even. Not loud, not uncertain, just clear. Reinhardt made a small gesture, half permission, half dismissal. The gesture of a man who still expected to be confirmed. Be my guest. He stepped back slightly, giving her space, though his posture still carried the confidence of someone who believed the conclusion had already been reached. Sandra did not pick the metal up the way he had. She set her tablet down first, clearing a place beside the case. Then she opened the lid with both hands, careful, deliberate. She slid the metal out flat onto her palm instead of lifting it by the ribbon, letting its full weight rest there. Only then did she turn it over. The reverse faced up. She didn't angle it toward the light, didn't rush, didn't narrate. She simply read. Her lips moved once, forming the first words silently, then stopped. Her eyes moved across the engraving again, slower this time, confirming. She placed her tablet beside the open case and tapped the screen awake. A document appeared, clean, indexed, precise. She adjusted it so that the text on the screen and the engraving on the metal lay side by side. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, "This is a Navy Cross." The words didn't rise. They didn't need to. Reinhardt gave a short shake of his head, reflex more than certainty now. It's hand-engraved. That's... Older awards were often hand-engraved. She said it the way you correct a date. No emphasis, no challenge, just fact. It isn't a tell, she added. It's the opposite of a tell. She touched the tablet again, scrolling once, then stopping. I digitized the citation index for the Beirut deployments. The 1983 actions. A small pause. I spent a year of my life inside those files. Her finger rested lightly on the screen. The name on the back of this medal is Hollis Galloway. The room seemed to draw in around that name. And the citation under that name, she said, tapping the screen once more. The one I have right here is real. Silence followed. Not empty silence, but the kind that settles into a space and holds there. The hum of the air conditioning became noticeable. A faint shift of weight somewhere in the line. The absence of movement, where there had been small, constant motion before. The man with the wrapped clock had lowered it onto a chair beside him without realizing he had done so. The younger man who had been filming now held his phone still, but his thumb had drifted away from the screen. Reinhardt looked at the tablet, then at the metal, then, almost involuntarily, at the scale, where the number had been right the entire time. Something in his expression gave way. Not all at once, but in pieces, as the structure he had relied on began to loosen under a single wrong assumption. I didn't weigh it, he said. His voice had changed. The performance had dropped out of it completely. I saw the engraving and I stopped looking. He looked up then, not at the camera, not at the room, but at Hollis. "You told me to turn it over," he said. "I didn't." A small pause. "I'm sorry." The words were quieter now, not offered to an audience. Just given. Hollis stood where he had been, his posture unchanged. He turned the ring on his finger once, the familiar motion steady and small. "All right," he said. Nothing more. No emphasis. No release. Just acceptance. Plain and measured. Sandra remained where she was, her hand still near the tablet, her eyes moving once more between the screen and the metal. The proof had been made. The metal had been named correctly now, but something else, something not written in weight or engraving, had only just begun to surface. The room did not return to what it had been. It shifted, quietly, but completely. Where there had been anticipation before, there was now stillness. Not the kind that comes from boredom, but the kind that follows a correction too large to ignore. People adjusted their stance without realizing it, as if the ground beneath the moment had tilted slightly, and they were finding their balance again. Reinhardt remained near the table. He did not reach for the metal this time. His hands stayed at his sides for a moment. Then one moved slowly to the edge of the table, resting there. Not to claim space, but to steady himself within it. His eyes lingered on the blue case, on the metal inside it, but there was no longer any attempt to read it from a distance. He had already missed what mattered once. Across from him, Hollis stepped forward. Not abruptly, not with any display of urgency, just a single step that brought him closer to the table, into the space that had been occupied by examination, assumption, and correction. He reached out and closed the case. The sound was soft, a precise click as the lid met the base. That small action seemed to gather the moment together. He did not lift the case immediately. His hand rested on top of it for a second, fingers spread slightly, as though acknowledging its presence before moving it again. Then he picked it up, holding it level, the way Sandra had handled the metal itself. There was no display in the gesture, no reclaiming, just care. The line of people who had been waiting began to dissolve, not in a rush, but in quiet increments. Someone shifted back a step. Another turned slightly toward the exit. The younger man with the phone lowered it fully now, the screen going dark as his grip relaxed. No one spoke. It was not required. Reinhardt let out a breath he had been holding without noticing. "I built the whole call on the engraving," he said, more to the space than to any one person. Didn't even question it. His gaze moved once more toward Sandra's tablet, then back to Hollis. "I've seen replicas with names added after the fact. It fit too easily." Sandra did not look up from the tablet as she responded. "Patterns are useful," she said, "until they replace verification." There was no sharpness in it, only completion. Reinhardt nodded once. "I skipped a step," he said. Hollis adjusted the case slightly in his hands, aligning its edges without looking down. "That happens," he said. The words landed without weight, but they did not dismiss what had occurred. They simply allowed it to exist without being expanded further. Reinhardt looked at him then, properly this time. Not as a subject, not as a claimant, but as a person standing in front of him. "You knew what it was," he said. Hollis gave a small shake of his head. "I knew what it wasn't," he replied. A pause followed. "That's enough sometimes." The statement settled into the room the same way the earlier silence had. Firm, quiet, complete. Sandra turned the tablet off. The screen went dark, taking the citation with it, but not the knowledge it had provided. She slid the device back into her bag with the same care she had used when opening the case. Her role in the moment had ended as simply as it had begun. The table, the scale, the lights, everything remained where it had been, unchanged in form. But the way they were being regarded had shifted. Reinhardt straightened slightly, not returning to his earlier posture, but finding something more grounded. "If you ever want documentation copies," he said, gesturing faintly toward Sandra's now closed bag, "we can—" Hollis shook his head once. "I have what I need." He held the case a little closer to his side. There was no final declaration, no attempt to restore the earlier rhythm. The moment did not need to be closed in that way. It had already resolved itself. And what remained was not the question of what the metal was worth, but the recognition of what it had always been. The room did not empty all at once. It thinned. One person stepped away, then another. Chairs shifted softly against the floor. The quiet movements carried no urgency, only a shared understanding that the moment had already reached its natural end. Conversations did not resume immediately. Even the smallest sounds seemed to hold back, as if unwilling to disturb what had settled there. Hollis moved toward the exit. The blue case remained in his hand, held steady at his side. His pace was unhurried, each step even, without any sense of departure or retreat. He did not look back at the table, the scale, or the lights. There was nothing left there that required his attention. Near the doorway he paused. Not for long. Just enough to adjust his grip on the case, his fingers shifting slightly along its edge. The gesture was small, habitual, something done without thought rather than intention. Behind him, Reinhardt remained where he was. He had not returned to the performance of the appraisal. The table in front of him still held its arrangement, tools aligned, surfaces clear, but it no longer functioned as a stage. His hand rested again near the scale, though he did not touch it. For a moment, he looked at the space Hollis had just occupied. Then he turned his attention downward, toward the table itself, as if reconsidering it, not the objects on it, but the way he had used them. Sandra stood a short distance away, her bag now closed, her posture unchanged. She observed the room with the same quiet attentiveness she had carried throughout, though there was nothing left to verify, nothing left to correct. The work, for her, had already been completed. Reinhardt spoke once more, though more quietly than before. "I'll remember that," he said. It was unclear whether he meant the metal, the process, or the moment as a whole. Sandra gave a slight nod. "That's the part that matters." No elaboration followed. Hollis reached the doorway. The light beyond the room was softer, less direct. It fell across the edge of the case as he stepped forward, catching briefly on its surface before fading again as he moved through. He did not stop again. The door closed behind him with a muted sound, not abrupt, not final, just complete. Inside, the room settled fully. Reinhardt exhaled slowly, a measured release this time, as though allowing the last of the moment to pass through him rather than holding on to it. He adjusted the position of the scale slightly, aligning it with the edge of the table. The motion was precise, careful, but no longer performative, just deliberate. Sandra shifted her weight once, then turned toward the opposite side of the room. She did not rush to leave, but neither did she linger unnecessarily. Her presence, like her intervention, had been exact in its timing. Around them, the remaining people resumed small movements, collecting belongings, straightening chairs, stepping into quiet conversations that stayed close to the surface. Nothing in the room had changed in a physical sense. The table remained, the tools remained, the process remained, but something in how they would be used, how they would be trusted, had been altered in a way that did not announce itself, yet would not easily be undone. Outside, beyond the closed door, Hollis continued down the hallway. The case stayed level in his hand. There was no need to open it again, no need to confirm what had already been confirmed. The weight of it remained the same as it had always been, unchanged by doubt, unchanged by correction, unchanged by the moment that had briefly tried to redefine it. And as he walked, that weight did not lessen, but it did not need to, because it had never been a question of what the metal was, only whether it would be seen for what it had always been.